Thank you for watching. My name is Glenn Morgan, and this is We the Governed. We're back for another episode. And for those of you who have been familiar with our DOGE Washington training and you're interested in that type of activity, this is definitely one of the shows for you. So we're going to be talking about fraud, and we're talking about fraud because it's so common. And it is one of the things that we do like to teach our activists to be able to learn how to detect it and find it in your local government wherever you live. Because unfortunately, we're never going to run out of the actual government fraudsters. Unfortunately, there's a lot more of them out there than there are activists looking for them. And we're giving you the tools and teaching you the approach that you need to have when you're going and digging into these. And so today we're actually going to be talking about 3 recent examples of fraudsters working in government that your taxpayer dollars essentially funded their fraudulent activities. And then, of course, before we go into that, just a quick reminder, if you haven't subscribed or hit the like button down below, please do that. And also, if you want to support our activities and a lot of the videos and stories that we do here, please feel free to go down below. You can support us directly on our website. The link is in the video description down below. Also, don't forget to share these videos with others. You never know who might be seeing these videos and getting them more inspiration of stories that they could tell in Washington State as well. So let's get into the DOGE Washington training. We are continuing this. We took about a month off this summer, but we're picking back up again. I got about 4 more classes that are on the calendar and a couple and beyond that that'll be added. If you're in the King County area, I'm anticipating I'm going to be up there where you live quite a bit. So I will link to our recent website link on some of these classes that are coming up. So if you want to get more involved and you see one that's close to you and you can make that work, and if it doesn't, then just contact a local group near you that might be interested in sponsoring us to come out and do presentations where you live as well. I think it's important, and the more people that get this training, the better off we are. So let's go into some of our examples of government fraud today. The example number 1, I'm calling this, it really isn't taxpayer money, it's actually mine. Unfortunately, that is the attitude of far too many bureaucrats and even occasionally the politician out there as well. Today's story, this one's going to come, example number 1, from Adams County, which is in eastern Washington. Usually not in the news frequently, and this is probably not the stuff they want to be in the news for. Very specifically here, we have a story here, and I've attached down below, as well as just got the front page here from the state auditor's office. This is actually their fraud investigations report into the Adams County Public Hospital District Number 2, or if you live there, it's called East Adams Rural Healthcare. And essentially what they found is district accounting clerk, and frequently if you've seen some of these stories in the past, it is oftentimes the clerk. In this case, her name is Yvette Ahuna. She embezzled $32,000 in 2023. And let's talk about what she actually did. Number 1, she actually changed vendor names on checks with a sticker that instead of paying those vendors actually paid her instead. And she did that on $20,755 worth of vendor checks. That's impressive. I didn't know that it was that easy to actually divert money at the bank, but apparently she got away with it for quite a while. She also embezzled an extra bonus $10,799 in credit card transactions made out to personal things for herself. And on top of that, just to add a little bit of icing to the cake here, she embezzled another $487 using an online business account that the hospital district had, shipping those items directly to her house. Nothing subtle about this. This was just flat out theft and fraud. She also had another 2,848 questionable expenses. I say they were questionable. The auditor's office can't absolutely be 100% sure that she stole that money, but it sure seems likely that she did. And of course, after they fired her, she basically attempted and failed to cash another $5,472 vendor check. And trying to do that again after you get fired, that's bold, and that one didn't pay off or work out so well for her. She was actually hired in January of that year, and she started, apparently, as far as the documents seem to support, she actually started stealing money by May. So she was only on the job just for a few months. The bank is actually who caught her. Here they actually notified the hospital district that it was really weird that these checks were being altered and the funds were being directed as personal transfers into her account. And even the bank started to notice that and sent the information in. This is actually what got her fired and caught in this case. The people often want to know what are the consequences, and in this case, the Adams County prosecutor did actually press charges. In the end, of course, Yvette Hanna, she had to plead guilty to 4 charges and was sentenced to 60 days in jail. And as far as I can tell, it doesn't appear that any of the money was ever recovered. So she got away with the $32,000 and only spent 60 days in jail. And that seemed like a pretty good payoff for a couple months in the big house. Now, here's a question, and this is something I like to always get to. If you were the DOGE Washington activist living out there in Adams County and you wanted to catch this, how would you actually do it? And number one, and this is one thing I continually emphasize in the training classes, you focus on reviewing those credit cards. It's really important to look at credit card receipts. Governments hand out credit cards like confetti at a parade. It's shocking in some of even little districts like this how many people have access to the business credit cards and how few people are really looking over their shoulders to see how that money's spent. I don't know how they seem to get away with this frequently over and over and over again, but they do. And so those are public records. You can get the record of the receipts and the actual itemized credit card expenses. And many of these expenses would have stood out like sore thumbs based on the items that were ordered and some of the receipts that clearly show that it was sent directly to her house instead of to the office. Just bold. But anyway, that's a good thing. Number one, always be paying attention to that. Always get those credit card receipts. I tell you, everybody looks at government. You should be doing that. You would have been able to possibly, if you had reviewed bank communications and correspondence with the jurisdiction, which is usually, those are emails, so they'll usually be public record, you would have caught some of the other requests from the bank saying, hey, is this okay? This clerk seems to keep transferring this money into her own personal account, and it seems weird that there's a sticker over the pay to line. How could that be? That you might be able to pick up in a correspondence if you were tracking that type of correspondence. Those are usually public records. Now let's jump into example number 2. Hey, that's funny. You actually thought I worked for the public. That's a good way. That's the way I would describe this particular situation. Coming from right next door to Adams County, we're going to Grant County, and in this case, more specifically, we're looking at the Grant County Port District number 3, or the Port of Mattawa, if you live there. It's actually a relatively small port district, got about $1 million budget, and unfortunately, the former executive director, Lars Leland, he embezzled at least $6,958 over a 6-month period, mostly for clothing, college expenses, fuel, and meals. And on top of that, it looks like there was another $10,486 of questionable credit card expenditures, which likely were stolen as well. And then, of course, another $14,740 that was apparently stolen as questionable payments to himself for unapproved sick pay and unreported vacation. More specifically, he actually had spent, when you look into this, he had spent a week where he was clearly at this college course over in like North Bend or some other place. Anyway, he had spent a week there, and it was clearly marked out as vacation, but he acted like he didn't take any vacation, and he was just getting paid during that time. So even though he clearly wasn't in the office doing whatever the taxpayers were paying him to do when he wasn't stealing money, he was actually taking that as pay. And then the other part of it, the sick pay, is he never called in sick. He might have left sick, but he never reported it, or at least claimed it. And at the end, he gave himself a big payout for the sick pay when the board there had explicitly said that that was not their policy. They shouldn't be doing that. But since he was the executive director, he's writing himself the check, and he ran off with that money too. So this is just a good example of some things that probably shouldn't have happened. He had actually resigned, and what happened is the new executive director that came in was actually reviewing these expenses and realized that obviously something was really wrong and that a lot of money had gone missing. And this is the guy that reported the problems found. So no audit necessarily detected it. It was actually the new employee coming in, taking over, who turned in the old one. Now, here he is right here, the former Port of Mattawa director who's under investigation for misuse of funds, and yes, it does look like he misused them. He was forced to pay back $3,600 basically to the port, but it doesn't look like any other funds were recovered. And the Grant County prosecutors, last I could figure out and last I could see, it looks like they're investigating, but there's been no evidence of any serious prosecution yet. It is possible that the Grant County prosecutor is a little bit more concerned about what's happening in the Moses Lake School District out there, but regardless, they don't seem to be following up on this one too much. Now, the question that any DOGE activist would want to have is exactly how could I catch this if I was there and lived in Grant County and I'm willing to pay attention to the Port District? Number one, again, just as like before, reviewing those credit card expenses regularly would have allowed you to catch this probably about a year before it was actually caught. So if you'd been reviewing those, just getting them on a regular basis from your local government, skimming through them, see if things make sense, this stuff tends to stand out like a sore thumb, so you'd probably be able to spot it. Secondly, reviewing the calendar and seeing the vacation payouts, because you can see when they get checks, even if they're writing it to themselves, it comes in the itemized expenditures, and you'd be wondering, wait a second, I'm familiar with their policy, which is another thing to be familiar with there. What is their employment policy in that local department? And how is this guy writing himself the extra $14,000 in sick pay or something like that? These are the kind of things that are actually really important, and I think they're worth knowing, and this is how you would catch somebody like that. Let's move on to example number 3 here. I'm calling this one, these tools look better at my house anyway. And here again, we're staying in Eastern Washington for this cycle. We're looking at Spokane County, where it looks like according to the fraud investigation report from the state auditor's office here, the Geiger Correction Center mechanic Richard Passmore stole $25,000 worth of tools, most of which he actually grabbed on his last day of work after he quit. Now, unfortunately for him, the Geiger Correction Center employees actually witnessed him stealing those tools on their CCTV cameras. Not exactly the brightest guy on the planet when he knows the entire place has cameras on it. After all, it's a Department of Corrections type facility. They have cameras to watch out if the inmates are stealing or leaving, and it turns out the employee was on his last day. So, of course, they notified the Spokane County detectives, who apparently executed a search warrant and then found another $15,000 worth of tools, in addition to the $10,000 worth of shop tools that he stole the last day of work. So, of course, it makes the paper here, $25,000 worth of property from the facility. They did recover at least most of the tools that they're aware of that he stole. It's not clear if he might have hawked some other items in addition to that, but they did find those. In the end, he did plead guilty to second-degree theft, and he actually, in addition to returning the tools, well, let's just say they got him back anyway, he had to spend 1 day in jail and had $700 in restitution. So not a huge penalty, but nevertheless, it was something that's what really ended up happening. Now, the question again is, how would you catch this? I actually think it'd be very unlikely, even if you were watching pretty closely. And this is mainly due to lack of quality inventory reporting. Years ago, this was something I focused on in a couple counties and a couple jurisdictions in Washington State about how they just don't track inventory. Their inventory control, and the auditor's office pointed out in the fraud investigation here that anything below $5,000 wasn't even tracked. So once they've spent the money, got the items in, employees can steal it all day long and nobody even notice because they're not tracking on their inventory sheets. In fact, if the employees hadn't seen this guy leaving, it probably would have been a great mystery to them where all those tools ended up going. So one of the things that I would encourage you to do in your local jurisdictions, especially if you have shops, fire departments are notorious for this, where a lot of stuff goes missing, that they actually do a better job itemizing and as policy down to a much smaller dollar threshold. So not just $5,000 items and above, which is what they had out here in the corrections facility, but instead bring it down to, say, $200 or above. Any of those items. You're probably not going to be able to track every tape measure and hammer, but or at least not as well, but at least you can track the items that are a little bit more attractive for somebody to take home. And in that case, you would have a better sense if you did inventory management and checking periodically. You'd at least know what year it was stolen in, if not who. It's actually kind of important, and I think that it's one of those things that people don't pay attention to. The other thing I want to just point out here real quick is that I actually don't think, unless you had whistleblowers, that there'd be really any practical way of uncovering this kind of theft at a place like that, even if you were a DOGE Washington employee paying a lot of attention, unless you could fix their inventory reporting system, which is something that the auditor's office mentions as a significant improvement that they should have here, but most jurisdictions don't have good inventory management. The auditor's office almost never audits hard goods or inventory, physical inventory. They might inventory sometimes and track vehicles or boats, things of that size, but they pretty much don't track anything else much at all. And so, unfortunately, theft is very common in government when it comes to this kind of stuff. This is why the DOGE Washington training is continuing, why it's so important that you come to these if you want to understand and learn more about how to do this. There's an endless supply, unfortunately, of bad behavior in local government, and it's up to you and I to help expose it because, frankly, government's not going to reform itself. They aren't going to fix it themselves, and they sure as heck don't want you looking, which is why we have to look. And the more of us that look, the more we're able to expose this, the more we're able to reduce some of the fraud, theft, and waste, and the inevitable problems that we have in local government. And again, it's never going to hold itself accountable. So if you want to hold it accountable, you have to be willing to show up because, as I always say, the future belongs to those who show up.